Today's guest is Chase Friedman, who began his career in the independent film and television industry as a writer, director, producer before fully immersing himself in the branded content landscape, where he founded Vanquish Media Group in 2016. And harnessing his passion for creative storytelling and brand strategy, Chase has guided business development and digital marketing campaigns for lean startups, Fortune 500s, and nonprofit organizations alike. And with a personal and professional commitment to purpose-driven business, his mission continues to guide brands and unlock a balance of sustainable growth and social impact. So Chase, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. I'm happy to hear. So yeah, I'd love to dive into a little bit more about, who you are beyond just the bio that I read.
Sure. As it sounds, I've had a bit of a circuitous sort of path to where I am today. There's been many pivots and iterations and redefining of myself and my career, which I kind of wear as a badge of honor. It's definitely been school of the hard knocks in terms of the way I immersed myself originally in film and television. Didn't go to film school, was making films, growing up and doing that through college, and have been in LA for the last 15 plus years and worked my way up the ranks in that capacity. So very bootstrap hustle mentality is what got me in and thriving in that element of my career. And I would say the same rules and the same approach is applied for working on the branding and marketing side. Don't have a traditional branding marketing background, but have channeled and kind of iterated and built upon my skills, my passions, my capabilities, and contextualize that for a different use case and what it stands to be today through Vanquish and my efforts, is more of that brand strategy and digital marketing space.
Love it. So it's kind of like I'm choosing myself throughout this whole thing, and I'm just gonna bank on, what I know and my ability to figure it out, and then just like kind of like that sense of like I don't necessarily need permission. It's just like I know what I know, and I'm gonna go for whatever the next thing is. That's at least my takeaway from your sharing. So you're welcome to add to any of that.
Yeah, no, I think the way you frame it is a valiant pursuit. I wish I could say that at every step of the way I had kind of that alignment. I believe in aligning purpose, passion, and clarity, to unlock your own greatest potential, personally, professionally. And there's varying degrees of that. I'm still learning every single day, and paving different sort of, you know, paths for myself, for my clients. So yeah, I think the one constant is staying power, as my former mentor used to say. A belief in in oneself, even if you don't fully believe in in what you've done and where you're going. But being able to trust that process. And I think just knowing that I never felt comfortable or satisfied or inspired in a traditional kind of work setting and scenario. I was more about pushing boundaries, doing things differently, taking risks, taking challenges. I know that makes me sound extremely, you know, like jumping in with 2 feet to a new experience, but there's definitely a degree of aversion there as well. Measure twice, cut once. But hey, it's gotten me to where I am today, so I wouldn't take anything back.
Yeah, 100%. And I could relate to that 100% as far as, I don't feel like I need to fit into this typical path and like the way that things are. Like I'm cool to try and do my own thing and take whatever educated risks I feel like I could take there. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that needs to be like this whole discussion about risk aversion, but it's just there is enough self-trust, or the vision itself is stronger to pull me through to
Yeah.
get to the other side. So I think it's a beautiful way to say it, and one that I relate to 100%. So given that you mentioned this whole sentiment of like, okay, well, there's a lot of things that kind of got me here. It seems like you're in this spot where, well, what got you here isn't really, as the saying goes, what is getting you there. So basically, what are the top challenges or problems that you are facing right now?
Um, the challenges are constantly evolving. It's a little bit like a whack-a-mole game, right? Just when you tackle one, another one pops up. For me, the journey of, starting as an individual and independent consultant, um, how to navigate and work with clients and serve clients in that capacity. I mean, those were challenges, and doing the work, right? Training and developing those skills. That was a challenge, and each one was able to kind of, continue to overcome, and still learning nuance of that. Then it elevated to, okay, great. Well, I need some more help. I need to build and scale a business and a team around me. What does that look like from an entrepreneurial standpoint? What does that mean? How does an entrepreneur operate? How do I want to operate? How do you manage people and teams and personalities? How do you manage more clients, more problems, more money, more problems? So with each sort of iteration and phase of my career, there's always challenges. I think today, right now, it's continuing to challenge myself. I think a lot of it's self-imposed on what can I do to be better, to develop more skills, to streamline my processes, to better serve my clients. Those are the things that, that I focus on and keep me up at night for good and for bad.
Okay, fair enough. So there was like a lot of stuff that was mentioned there, from,
Yeah.
challenging myself on just improving certain skill sets that can move me forward. There
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of the talk about, the responsibility of scaling and the responsibility of more, and then at what point does that get too overwhelming before I have to evolve as a leader? So what lands for you as the most relevant to kind of bring into this space today?
Um, I think what is timely right now is, I'm going through a bit of an inflection point in my journey in my career, where I've been running my agency for the last 7, 8 years, steadily growing and scaling that operation. Have had great success and some great losses along the way. Um, and I am recalibrating that agency model, which has been, more of a vendor, to other clients, into a little bit less top heavy sort of organization that I have to service, right? In terms of running the business as a full-time job, and being able to carve out a little bit more space for myself as more of a strategic consultant, as a fractional CMO. And so I'm kind of pivoting my focus and my agency's efforts to allow myself a little bit more time to dedicate into a more curated group of clients and projects that I find interesting. Um, what does that mean for the future of the agency? What does that mean for my, role as a consultant again? It's just another evolution in the cycle.
Okay. So that's a great question. What does that mean to you?
Um, well, what other skills do I need? What is how am I serving and delivering value and solutions in a different capacity, when it is kind of going back to when I was a consultant, just me, myself, and I, versus an entire team that I can delegate to. Um, what does that look like from a financial standpoint and the stability there? Um, continuing to find and refine my niche that I operate and serve in, which is, I think, as you mentioned at the top, purpose-driven people and organizations. Um, what does that mean for myself, and what do I want to offer and nurture in that capacity? What does that mean for them in terms of what their path looks like? I know there's a lot of stuff to unpack there, but a little small window into my brain in terms of the ever present racing thoughts.
You mean like the tapestry of big questions that get funneled into like one answer?
It
Yeah.
is constantly, yeah, it's an overflow of those big questions.
Okay. So if we then take, like, especially that bit, right? Like, there's so many considerations of like all of the possible iterations, and I'll just reflect to you kind of what I'm hearing or seeing. The majority of your answers. So let's just say you had 5, 6 major topics of
Mm-hmm.
like depth, you know, the majority of them, 80, 90% of them were about the external.
Mm-hmm.
How does this look like for my clients? How does this look
Mm-hmm.
like for my team? How does this look like for my niche? How does this look like for
Right.
finances? And then one was about, well, what does that really mean for me?
Hmm.
So if we inverted that ratio and made this 90% about, okay, well, I am the leader of this business, and ultimately I get to create it in the vision that suits me, not me suiting where the business is pulling me.
Hmm.
What would your answer look like then?
Yep, great question. This is fun because I usually get to ask these sorts of questions to
Yeah, it's
my
always
peers
funner
and
on this side
clients,
of the
but
equation
I
than
don't ever have to
yeah.
answer myself. For me, more intrinsically and internally, some of the challenges, I'm dealing with, clearly, evidently, overwhelm, right? Overwhelm, uncertainty, stress, burnout, being pulled in too many different directions. Those are the biggest ones. Even a step deeper, something that I struggle with, and I think many leaders do, whether they're willing to admit it or not. And this is why we're here, being vulnerable, is that imposter syndrome, right? That feeling and the mentality of, that sort of accidental entrepreneur, like, okay, well, yeah, sure, I can frame myself as an entrepreneur, but it wasn't as if I intended and set out for that from day one. So some of those sort of inner considerations around um, reconciling what I'm good at and what I'm passionate at with what brings me joy and fulfillment.
Okay, so beautifully articulated and beautiful awareness around, okay, what are the actual kind of mechanics of what's going on here, right? So we started this whole thing saying, okay, well, there's this like tapestry of topics that my brain goes to try and solve, 10 different complex plates all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, if I turn that around, kind of what's present, well, overwhelm obviously makes sense if you're trying to do all of that all at once. So 110%. Uncertainty, well, how am I actually going to solve all of those things? Because each one seems important, each one seems urgent, yet I can't just dive into one because then I'm going to neglect all the other ones,
Sure.
right? Obviously, that's going to be stressful. Continued bits and pieces of this over time are definitely, going to flirt with burnout. So that absolutely makes sense. And then, of course, what's left over? Well, clearly, I never set out to be an entrepreneur. Is this really for me? Can I actually do this? So before I go on, just like what lands for you from that reflection back?
I mean, yes, yes to all the above. Um, yeah, I mean, I think those are common um, considerations, concerns, evaluations that I'm constantly making and reflecting on in myself. And I think those have been ever present at different stages of my career, you know, um, no matter where you at, whether it's entering a new industry or space or capability, or you've been there for, 5, 6, 7 years. Um, this is, clearly, obviously, it's more of a habitual sort of personal pattern that I operate in and around. And so, it's kind of like always moving that goal line, right? Just when you think you've gotten there, it's like, okay, well, what's the next step? And when am I going to get to that next step?
So it kind of sounds like the satisfaction and the fulfillment, it's like the horizon, right? Like I can
Sure.
never, by definition, reach the horizon. It's always just out of reach, no matter what it is that I achieve. Like, is that
Sure. I mean,
accurate?
yeah, I think there's micro wins along the way, but certainly, I certainly have the propensity to continue to kind of challenge and push myself, and sometimes maybe too much so, where, not really sitting back and accepting and embracing some of those wins and saying, hey, you know, this is pretty incredible what I've achieved to date thus far. Let's stop, let's celebrate, let's absorb it, right? I think in my mind it's constantly going to how I can be doing better or more or different, or what is that next challenge and forefront that I have to tackle.
Okay. So if we now zoomed out a little bit, and let's just say even take that last piece that you said, I don't really have like full 100% genuine fulfillment. It's kind of these blips of micro wins. So how do I stop and celebrate? How do I like, it's almost even the question, like, how do I get better?
Right.
it presupposes I have to be better to be happy,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So if you zoom out from, let's just say, even just that point, how do you think this impacts your business?
Um, how does it impact my business? Well, um, I think it's a symptom of perhaps being pulled or distracted or um, I think distracted is the right word in a multitude of different areas and ways, right? So when that's applied to a business, the question is always around, okay, great. Well, how do we scale to the next level? What teams, what clients are we going to need? What level of support? What do we have to improve on as a company? Versus, hey, we're really good at these one or two things. Let's just rock it in this particular space, in this niche, at this level, right? So instead of resting on our laurels and maybe refining that singular model for success and expertise, you know, probably laying on a few more maybe disparate or unnecessary priorities or elements around that, quite frankly, distract from the singular focus of the business, right?
So I guess what I'm hearing there is like there's not real focus or concentrated effort of all business resources towards like one main thing. It's kind of like the way that my
Mm-hmm.
brain's trying to solve 10 different things,
Mm-hmm.
it's reflected in the work that we ended up doing. Because there's one, like it's essentially like a boundary thing of like it sounded like we say yes to things that we probably should have said no to, like as far as like projects or
Sure.
clients. Like, would
Yeah.
that be accurate?
Yeah, I think so. Um, I think that's very accurate. I think, starting the business um, and coming from a place of needing and wanting to kind of, really learn and start from scratch, there's a lot of saying yes to projects and opportunities that may not have been the best fit at that time. And that's, I think that's part of just the journey and the lesson. Um, but over time, needing to be better about setting those boundaries and saying no to certain things that are misaligned, um, narrowing our allocation of resources. I think you put it really well. So there is more singular focus and clarity for myself and for my team.
Right. So if you now take a step back and looked at that as you as the leader, like how
Mm-hmm.
does it make you feel to be in this distracted position?
Um, it's it can be frustrating. I know that I've been on the receiving end of that, and I think one of the biggest lessons, kind of the anti-lesson that I've leveraged or used to guide how I want to operate as a business leader, as an entrepreneur. I've worked for a lot of people that have demonstrated what I do not want to become, what I don't want to be. Um, save for maybe, really one, maybe two people, haven't had a true sort of mentor in this space in previous capacities and jobs um, and roles. And so that, I think, and if anything, that served as a motivation for me to say, you know what, I want to be better for myself and for my people when I'm at that level. And I try really hard to be mindful of some of those qualities, whether it's empathy or compassion or leadership or listening or communication. But I'm certainly still victim to a lot of the things that I probably wouldn't have appreciated if I were in their shoes. That, a little bit of that ambiguity or confusion and not that singular direction and vision and focus on, you know, one one problem set.
Okay. So again, beautifully articulated as far as like I think your self-awareness and your ability to see the landscape of like any one thing and then like it ripples out to so many different ways
Mm-hmm.
and I see how it impacts. I think that part's abundantly clear. I think it's abundantly clear how much of your own self-reflection you uh do, especially mentally. What I find interesting when I want to reflect back to you is really the question was, okay, well, how does all of this make you feel? Right. And it
Mm-hmm.
was frustrating was the first word, but then it's like,
Right.
let me justify why I'm frustrated. And then you beautifully articulate, okay, well, these are all the reasons for my
Mm-hmm.
frustration.
Right.
And the reason that I reflect that back to you, because oftentimes when I have, clients or guests that come on that are very good at things intellectually, like sharp, you get all the things, you understand the patterns, you're very self-aware. The part that tends to get overlooked because the brain's so busy and overwhelmed looking at all of the problems to solve, you actually miss on, okay, well, what is the wisdom that my feelings are actually telling me?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go a bit deeper into this, and why I'm asking these questions is because early on, right, how do we start this whole conversation? I said, okay, well, given that your brain goes to all of the externals and spends so little time on like, what is it that you actually want? How do you want to feel? How do you want to show up in your business? Even when prompted to then like really dial in and look at the specifics of how you want to show up in particular areas, how you want to lead, it
Mm-hmm.
still goes to the externals. So there
Mm-hmm.
could be a lot of stuff missing of like, okay, well, if I'm constantly focusing on the externals and hoping that they make me happy and fulfilled, then maybe I'm missing the point because I'm trying to look for something out there that I actually should be looking for in here. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that was a lot thrown your way. What's landing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a spot on observation. If you want, maybe reframe, the question so I can kind of better answer it and get, now that we pulled back a few layers, get to a little bit of that deeper internal sort of wisdom that I think you were asking for. So, you know, throw it back to me in another way and let me see if we can circle back on it.
Perfect. So when you look at, let's just say, if we just take in isolation this lack of focus
Mm-hmm.
across the organization,
Right.
and if you had to answer it only from the perspective of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
how does that make you feel? What is your internal experience of looking at that landscape if you couldn't talk about an external?
Um, I think, there's feelings of sort of, again, it goes back to what I've shared with you before, certainly that overwhelm, that sort of, inefficiency and kind of wrestling and struggling in that fear of, I'm not putting my finite time in the right places and areas. Um, I think it goes back to that fear of vulnerability, right? By perhaps not having some of the answers and clarity and guidance that I feel like I should, that it puts me at a deficit. It hinders and impacts my ability to kind of lead. Um, and I think wrestling with I think a bit of a I'm more of an introvert that can flip the switch to an extrovert when needed. And so there is a certain sort of personality, still authentic, but you have to put on that armor kind of going into battle each day, whether it's for your team or your clients or whomever. And, is that the right fit? Is that the right sort of approach and attitude and mentality and posture that is sustainable, that I enjoy doing each and every day? Some people are wired for that. Like, great, let me grab my sword and shield and I'm going to battle each and every day. I think there's certain entrepreneurs that are wired for that and that look at it as like entrepreneurs are meant to just break through walls at every turn and be unreasonably, steadfast in their vision. Um, I don't know that intrinsically I'm wired that way. So how do you reconcile, what I believe is needed to grow and run a business with what's internally inside of me and what's going to make me happy?
Well, thank you for allowing yourself to go
Did we
there.
go deeper that time?
Yeah, yeah, no, I fully respect it, and again, beautifully articulated as well. And I think what's coming out for me as I listen to that is what's really yearning here is I want the authenticity to like be who I am fully
Mm-hmm.
in my business. Yet I have all of these thoughts and beliefs around, well, what an entrepreneur in a business ought to be like. It should be armor
Mhm.
and pushing and kind of this, let's just say, aggressive nature, yet my nature seems to be the opposite of that. So I'm trying to squeeze myself into this, square. Like I'm this round peg into this square
Mhm.
hole type of thing, right? So really what I'm hearing here is like I don't believe or I don't know how to be authentic in the business that I'm building. That's why I can't, like I say yes to things that I shouldn't. That's why I have to show up in a particular way that's against my nature. Obviously, this is going to be very overwhelming. How do I handle everything so that nobody sees chinks in my armor? It's like a
Mm.
lot of that kind of hamster wheel of just stress
Mhm.
and overwhelm. So again, I know it's a lot thrown your way. What does or does not land?
Yeah, I think a lot of that lands. You know, I think one of my greatest fears is showing up inauthentic, right? The irony is not lost on me. A lot of what we do from an agency standpoint and work is in and around social media, digital communications, omni-channel marketing, etc. Um, I don't really use social media personally a whole lot. I'll use LinkedIn, for primarily for communication, business development, but I'm a lot more of a private person. And so, there's certain, all of us are surrounded by a constant onslaught of white noise and communications and keeping up with that cadence and that pace, right? Where do I fit within that, right? What is needed as a baseline to do what I do versus, where is stretching beyond my comfort zone. I think that I do think to your point around wrestling with how do I stay true to myself and my beliefs and my authenticity? How can I balance that while still remaining sort of competitive and relevant in the marketplace? Um, not willing to just merely chase a trend or put out a message that says, "Hey, I'm gonna 10x your business overnight." I mean, we are so surrounded by these empty promises and these smoke and mirrors approaches. That's really, quite frankly, what's emboldened me to start my business. I believe there was a better, more intentional, more transparent way of going about it, and yet, you know, we're a small blip on the radar. There's the world does not need more, digital marketing agencies, or coaches or consultants or whatever you want to call it. So finding what is the right balance and mixture of my unique sort of strength and unique brilliance that can still provide value to people amidst everything else they're facing on a day-to-day basis. I know that was rambling, but hey, it's a proxy for therapy. I'm on the couch, I'm talking.
No, it's perfect. So and I think that's where generally the gold nuggets tend to come out. So what I would ask to follow up there is like if you lost the ability to think that you couldn't show up authentically in your business and still succeed, like who would you be?
If I could not show up authentically,
Like if you lost the ability to think I
right?
can't show up
Oh, just kind of
as who
removing
I
that
am.
doubt, that
Yeah,
that
like if I remove
fear.
the doubt that I can't show up authentically, I like magic wand, I lost that ability. What's left over? Who would you be?
Um, there'd be a lot less sort of like you said, saying yes to things I don't want to do or, you know, have the capacity or bandwidth to do. Um, there is, you know, a little bit more of a um, kind of go with the flow sort of attitude and approach, less pressure on myself to hit certain kind of levels of you know success or accomplishment. Um, I think I think there'd be a lot more peace in the day to day, and what I know how to do, and not worrying about all the rest of the bullshit.
Okay. That's a pretty good vision And a pretty stark contrast to the overwhelm, stress, and anxiousness of where my mind tends to go right now. So, what's your reflection on that?
I mean, yeah, let's take the blue pill. Um, um, yeah, that's part of it too, is, I think, uh, yeah, I think about and wrestle with this stuff quite a bit, and this is a great exercise for you, and I appreciate you kind of pulling it out, pulling on that thread, so to speak. Um, that's the existential struggle, is wrestling with um, the intrinsic motivation to do more, be successful, provide for my family, feel accomplished. And on the flip side of it is feeling a sense of calm and peace and assurance with where I'm at right now in this moment today. And not being overwhelmed with all those other external sort of triggers, motivations, and pursuits.
So, if you could be peaceful and ambitious at the same time, like how would you show up differently?
It's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer to that. I mean, I think that is definitely the pursuit. Um, it's definitely being more mindful and staying in the moment. I'm a firm advocate of meditation, mindfulness, and it's in those moments where you can truly be fully present in the moment, doing what you do, and that's to me, that's flow, right? Being in the flow of what I do best and what I do, that brings me joy. Those are the moments that I feel those sort of micro satisfactions and saying, you know what, that felt good, that's really effective, it's working for the client, they're happy, I'm happy, awesome, you know and then it's okay, great. What's the next meeting on the calendar? What's the next thing I've got to tackle and challenge? So how do I stay more in that flow, which is where I think that peace comes from, that bridge of peace and accomplishment and doing the work. And less in those idle periods of, all right, well, what's next? And what more? And what should I have done differently or better? In those idle periods, it's when you start to impose those new challenges and hurdles and stop reflecting on the wins you just had.
So, if you were to rewind back what you just said, what I would invite you to actually like listen back on is when exploring these desired states of like where I want to be, there wasn't actually a part of you that said I would like do less work and I'd like, drink Mai Tais and chill on a beach.
No,
It
no.
was, I would go from project to project. I'd make sure I have happy clients. I would like do cool work. There would be work with impact. I'm like, that kind of sounds like what you're doing now. Let's just say, just strictly objectively. I know your experience isn't that, but that's kind of my point. It's like you're already doing a distorted version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And half of that distortion is coming from these thoughts that are basically like echoes of some version of I'm not good enough. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's also like this, the other half of that is bleeding into, well, then the decisions I make within the business, the decision that the team makes also kind of reflect that. And it's its own self perpetuating like hamster wheel. Right. So again, what lands for you there? What doesn't?
Um, I don't know. I mean, clearly there is that hamster wheel, that cyclical effect. Um, I know that in those moments of sort of idle time, those breaks away from it, like you said, the not working, I can get a little bit stir crazy and anxious, right? Um, I don't, for me, it's not that like I aspire to just do less, work less, accomplish less. I don't think that would be fulfilling at all in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do I improve my mentality, my mindset, my acceptance, my patience within myself, um, and adjusting maybe the the speed, the frequency, the nonstop pace that I think I push myself towards, right? Finding that balance doesn't mean not doing anything, doesn't mean doing necessarily less, but in a much more kind of conscious, diligent, intentional way. And that goes back to what you said. What am I working on first and foremost, right? The type of project. So saying no to the stuff that isn't a fit, saying yes to more of the things that are a fit when they come, um, finding joy in that process. Um, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and you said it's eradicating that feeling of not enough, not being enough, never doing enough, not achieving enough, right? That's this is a much cheaper therapy session than I've spent years and countless hours working on, and I'm not there yet, but that's I think part of the journey.
Yeah, 110%. Eliminating, so that sense of like I'm not good enough, I call all of the other like limiting patterns we would experience, from overwhelm to procrastination to
Mm-hmm.
self-sabotage to, go down the litany of catchphrases that we've labeled
Yeah.
certain patterns. To me, they're always masks of I'm not good enough, because fundamentally, if I was good enough, I could just say no and be confident that I
Mm-hmm.
could do the next thing. If I was good enough, it would be easy to set and then maintain boundary. If I was good enough, then I wouldn't
Right.
need to worry about being better. I could actually be present and celebrate not just the micro wins, but the existence of where I'm at and what I'm moving
Mm-hmm.
towards. So I'm glad that that's hitting for you, because it's such a big part of the work that I do, and will get success from my clients. It's really understanding you have all of these things here, and so much of the world keeps telling us, well, just you're one funnel away from like everything that you want. You are just, a strategy session away from like having the perfect business, which may or may not be true tactically, but it's always going to be distorted if the reason you're doing it is to fill basically this I'm not good enough hole in my soul, whether you recognize that consciously or unconsciously. And I know I'm sharing that more generally than
Yeah.
specific to your situation, but again, if anything lands, by all means, feel free to
Yeah.
share.
I think you're spot on. I think as humans we're wired that way, but I think even more so culturally, Western culture, um, there's a greater tendency, and this is the foundation of marketing, right? It's agitating a pain, a problem point, of someone that doesn't feel like they have enough, good enough, you know, right? What is the problem they're facing? It is always starting with the challenge, the problem, the need, the desire. So, it's interesting that this is, the work that I do. And part of that is identifying those needs, um, those voids, whatever it is, whether you're selling a product or a service or what have you. Um, for me, I think that is a part of the struggle and the pursuit is to how do you do that, but in an authentic way. Like there's a way you can do that where it's just basically, quite frankly, triggering and manipulating. But I also believe that you can be doing that to help guide someone to a place of finding more comfortability, right? It's the reason why you do what you do, right? People out there like myself in the world struggle with this not good enough, this vulnerability, this imposter syndrome, and you have a solution to help kind of hopefully help guide them to a resolution to feel like they are good enough. So you know, it's interesting that I wrestle with that personally. It's a big part of the work that I do. Um, it's a big part of the culture that exists around us. We're bombarded by it. Um, yeah, so I think we're all looking for, that sense of peace, like I am good enough, and this is enough, or I am content with where I am today.
Beautifully said. And I guess the only thing I would add to that is like the part of your own personal evolution now isn't to get better at extracting this for other people so you can help them authentically market
Mm-hmm.
and sell. It's to actually now turn that lens inward and begin to explore, how do I get to the core of this, heal this, transcend this, and eliminate this
Mhm.
not so that I can sell more stuff, even though that might actually happen because you're going to be selling to more authentic clients, but so that I can just have like more peace, more enjoyment, more enthusiasm, be that peacefully ambitious CEO that I want. And then that's going to be the tide that raises all the ships
Mhm.
of like my business. So I think it's a
Mhm.
beautiful kind of way to, move this towards a close. So just for the sake of my own curiosity, like, does this feel complete for you as far as like mapping this out, or is there still something left outstanding?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know we're just scratching the surface, but yeah, it was definitely a good sort of pursuit and exercise. And I think, I appreciate being able to do this with myself. It's I know that in order to show up authentically, provide the most value for someone that I work with, I need to make sure that I'm owning and wearing, that level of, authenticity and confidence and trust. Um, but I think I'm certainly, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs like this, I'm like the cobbler that, has holes in his shoes, right? Being the last to serve oneself. And that goes for things that I do for the business, strategies, tactics that we deploy for our clients. We don't even do for, our own business. But I think soulfully the same thing, the amount of energy that I expend and expel for clients and showing up for them. I need to be doing more for myself first and foremost. And I think that will, certainly pay dividends in my own capacity to serve and provide value to others, which is what brings me joy. So
Love it. Love it how it's like, okay, I know if I heal this, it has all these ripple effects, which
yeah,
I think really speaks to the authentic part of you that really wants to serve. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So yeah, why don't you just close us off and let everybody know where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for that.
great. Find me in therapy. No. um, yeah. vanquishmediagroup.com is our website, our agency. Um, you know, encourage you to reach out to me, ask any questions you have on LinkedIn, Chase Friedman. As I already admitted, that's probably the main and only social platform that I find kind of fulfillment and safety in. And yeah, I'm more than happy to, whether it's work related or personal related. I get joy in connecting with good, like-minded, purpose-driven people, whichever stage of the journey they're at. And if I can lend some guidance and some help along the way, um, groovy, new friend, new ally in the mix.
Beautiful. Love it. Well, Chase, thank you very much for walking your own talk, diving into, the vulnerability that you have those parts of you that fear. Uh, Much respects to you and for everybody else listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.